Production of this program was made possible in part by the Harry Kramer Memorial Fund and by the Friends of the March of the Living.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Silverman. In April 1988, 1,500 teenagers from around the world traveled to Poland to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day and to see for themselves what happened to millions of people during the Holocaust, less than 2 generations ago. Some had lost their entire families. Some had lost no one they knew by name. The focal point of this trip was a 2-mile walk from Auschwitz to Birkenau. What had once been a march to the death was now the march of the living. The universal messages of the Holocaust cried out to the young marchers. Never to forget the horrible consequences of prejudice and discrimination, never to be silent in the face of evil, never, never again. The words that you are about to hear are not just my words. They come from the interviews, reflections, and writings of the participants themselves, young and old, Jew and Gentile. The entire story is derived from their own words, letters, poetry, and even their music. This is not the first documentary about the Holocaust, but it is the first told and seen through the eyes of today's young people. Please join Colleen Dewhurst and me as we share their experience with you on the March of the Living. Dear Anne, it doesn't go away. The memories, the smells, the visions. I thought it would have dimmed by now, but it hasn't. I could feel the cold, see the people, the 800,000 pairs of shoes at Majdanek, flashes, barbed wire images, the iron gate with Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, at the entrance to Auschwitz, the barren stones of Treblinka, the Warsaw Ghetto, and the celebration in Israel, the exciting air show, the mock battle scene, and the fun we had, the faces, places, hands, tears we shared, and the pain we experienced. It all invades my thoughts, and I need to share my feelings with you, since we both went together on the March of the Living. Looking back now, Anne, can you believe we were actually there? 1,500 Jewish teens from around the world marching together in silence on that cold April day. Marching from Auschwitz to Birkenau, 2 miles, the same route that millions of Jews walked to their deaths more than 40 years ago. Only we were commemorating Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. How it snowed at the start of the march and how we got colder and colder, each of us imagining what it must have been like to be forced to march in thin prison uniforms. But the cold couldn't stop us. We were there to show the world that Hitler did not succeed, that the new generation of Jews was marching for those who died there.
The April wind stirs foreign land. It scatters ashes, whispers voices of the dead. 6 million lives did perish here. Still heard the cries of children haunted by their fears. For you who died, I must live on. Just empty barracks and barbed wires left to mourn. Hold out your hands, please give me strength to find your eyes. To pray, to cry, to live, to fight. The songs you could not sing, I promise, yes I promise I will sing. For you who died, I must live on. Just empty barracks and barbed wires left to mourn. Hold out your hands, please give me strength to find your eyes. To pray, to cry, to live, to fight. The songs you could not sing, I promise, yes I promise I will sing.
You've just made the March of the Living from Auschwitz I to this place. Along the same road taken by our mothers, our fathers, our sisters and brothers as they are led to their annihilation. You stand between the ovens in which Nazis and their cohorts exterminated millions of human beings, including a full third of the Jewish people. Let your hearts take part fully in today's words of memorial and hope. And then feel compelled to tell this to all young people, wherever you may be. Never again.
Today and always we remember humanity's greatest crime against the Jewish people, humanity's greatest crime against itself. We will never forget those who gave their lives here, and it is with their memory, profoundly etched in our hearts, that we shall prevail.
All tracks led to Auschwitz. Millions of Jews from all over Europe were transported in boxcars. Hundreds in each car, packed in so tightly they were forced to stand for days, weeks. No food, no water, until their final destination.
Auschwitz, a place where even death couldn't possibly survive. This infamous camp where millions of people were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. Think of it, over 2 million Jews. I could still see Nechama and her daughter Ricky walking with us through Auschwitz. How hard it must have been for Nechama to come on the march. Her parents were among the few survivors of Auschwitz, and luckily she and her sister were hidden during World War II by Christian families in Czechoslovakia. It must have been very meaningful for Ricky to share this experience with her mother.
It's just too crazy, you know?
Nechama's sensitivity helped all of us cope with what we were seeing.
One of the kids said to me, I didn't know it was going to be this difficult. And God, I think that's the way we all feel. We didn't know it was going to be this difficult. For me, just to think that I'm walking the same places that my father walked as a prisoner, and here I am walking with my daughter as free people, it's just... It's mind-boggling.
Auschwitz today is very different from what we pictured. Originally a military barracks, it became a concentration camp, and now it's a museum of horror, filled with exhibits of everything that can be taken from a human being. His possessions, his body, even his ashes. The human hair, tons and tons of human hair, some woven into fabric, some of the hair still left in braids just as it was cut off. The bowls the prisoners used, their eyeglasses, even false limbs. Among the many things I hated about Auschwitz was the business of Auschwitz. Who could have the audacity to build a hotel on the site where so many died? And the souvenir shop. The word souvenir just grated against my back like chalk on a blackboard. What am I going to bring home? A model crematorium to leave in the family room? What kind of souvenir could I bring from Auschwitz? How do you bring home death as a souvenir?
Business is booming. Business is booming. Tours today. Snacks sell. Grateful gifts. Buses bring bundles. Hotel hospitality. Sculptures sit. Movie matinees. Shining showers. Glass glares. Clean crematoriums. Government granted. Groomed grass. Polished pavement. Carefully crafted clothing, hemmed hair, shine shoes, magnificent museums. Business is business, and business is booming.
When I think of business at Auschwitz, I think of the business of death.
We saw the execution wall where thousands of prisoners were shot to death. Next to the wall were memorial candles, flowers, Israeli flags. I was touched by the memorial candles, but since I had none of my own, I considered the possibility of simply adding a piece of paper to the fire to make it burn brighter as a memorial to those who perished at this wall.
I can remember so clearly one of our leaders, Gene Greenswag, standing at the model gas chamber and crematorium describing how the Germans created an atmosphere of normalcy, how efficient they were, and how deadly.
Because the whole idea was, even though people were suspicious of what probably was going on, it was part of the illusion that it wasn't death that they were going to. And it was carried out because they had to keep that group of people waiting to go in calm, quiet, not rioting. The model is superb in showing you what happened in the gas chamber. Because if you look as you go by here and take a look, you will see that people began to climb and claw because the fresh air was on the top. Gas rises. And so the strong would climb over the weak in an effort to try to save themselves. And when the things came up, everybody was stripped. It wasn't only taking out gold teeth. They explored all the human cavities, all the human openings, in case somebody hid jewelry or diamonds or something in parts of their body, so that they could take everything that came out. And then they used everything for whatever they could.
The model didn't prepare us for being inside a real gas chamber. It looked so ordinary, like a gigantic basement. But Gene shocked us into reality.
You're standing in the middle of a gas chamber. People stood here and they died. People were packed in here like cattle, and a black arm stuck its hand through here, and he threw in the pellets, and in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they were dead. Clawing at the walls, grabbing, trying to get out, and the Germans stood and watched. What great sport. And then when it was over, they would get the gas out of here. They would come and they'd take the bodies and they'd move them into the crematoria, which you're about to go into now.
Although most of the killings were done at Auschwitz, when I think back to the most emotional part of the trip, it was at the camp located right in the center of the Polish city of Lublin, Majdanek.
I just go back and think how the people around it could be silent and not say a word about what was going on, those that knew. And the scene at Majdanek really scared me because the city was what, 10 miles away maybe? It was just so visible. You could smell, you could hear.
You could smell human flesh. It has a terribly unique flavor. There's a different smell altogether. And probably, as we saw in other places, there were little flecks of bones and human, parts of a human body that would blow out with the smoke. That meant in your neighborhood you could walk around the street and you could see little pieces of bone and all these other things that were there. So you got the full feeling of it. There's no way people living around here couldn't know.
Majdanek was the most difficult of all because this camp remains the same, basically untouched since the Nazis hurriedly retreated in 1944. Everything is there, intact, from shoes to ashes.
We walked into one of the rooms. It was a converted storeroom, I guess, and it had thousands and thousands of pairs of shoes in it. And each of those shoes was, to me, one of the people who had died in the camp. And it's just seemed to put it in terms that I could understand of how many people had died there. Because in each of those shoes there was baby shoes and adult shoes and children's shoes. And every one of those shoes was a person. And that's the image that will stick with me forever.
Large and small, they came and stayed. All sizes, shapes, they worked and played. They are the soles of Majdanek shoes. I walked inside another barrack that had prisoners' uniforms hanging wall to wall. I touched the shirts, pants, and caps, and wondered who once wore these clothes. Maybe a young girl, maybe an old man, forced to assist in the destruction of his people. Stroking the material, I shuddered at the thinness of the fabric. Thousands must have died just from the cold. On each shirt was a yellow star and serial number, the code of death. Many of the pants were torn and tattered, perhaps from slave labor or brutal beatings. I could almost see the bodies that were once wrapped in these clothes. I envisioned the faces with haunting black eyes and deep, somber voices. One can't just say that 6 million Jews died. These were 6 million individuals, each with dreams, plans, and aspirations. These were young boys who forced themselves to be brave for the sake of their families. These were teenage girls whose dreams of marriage and family were shattered. Young mothers whose only concern was to scrape together enough food for their children. Grandparents who, in their lifetimes of experience, had never seen such pain and cruelty.
Majdanek is also where we got close to Abe Rosenthal. As difficult as it was for you and me to be there, can you imagine the pain of being a Holocaust survivor and going back? Did you realize that Abe was only 17 when he was transported to Auschwitz by train? He was put to hard labor at several different camps, but he was young and strong, so he managed to survive. Many people killed themselves in the camps. I asked him, why didn't they all?
Well, if you are dead, there's the last chance what you got. The human being is a real human beast. Can be adapted to any circumstances. As long as you can breathe, you always have hope that somehow you will survive, without knowing how.
Abe was such a great help to us. I don't know how he would have done it without his strength.
And we became one family. And to me, all the kids from our bus, and my daughters and sons, I am very proud of them. I think we got through to them. They know what's all about.
In Majdanek, after the war, an enormous domed monument was built by the Polish government, which covered the mountain of ashes and bone fragments left behind.
How many went to their death consumed by the fire of the crematoria to make this mound of ashes? Is this what's become of my people?
Standing under this dome of ashes, Jennifer Gomberg recited a haunting rendition of Yevchenko's poem about the tragic events at Babi Yar.
And then the shots stars of shocking light, and brother embraces sister for the last time. If there is a God, and this God saw and heard it all, why? Did he now lie down and die alongside of them? And the people come up and fall into the ravine, like stones. Children into women, old men on top of children. In the pit, a girl calls, "Don't cover my eyes with dirt." And a boy, "Must I take my socks off too?" Then he was still, in a last embrace with his mother. And just next to him, a little girl, or boy maybe. "Please leave me alone. Uncle, I'll sing you a song." And suddenly bouncing up like a ball, falling back into the pit, into the still, stirring heat. "I have come to you, Babi Yar. I, too, might have been here with you. We might have embraced at the end, fallen into the pit, together. Till I die, it will torment me that I did not share your death. For a moment I closed my eyes and listened hard. And then I heard the voices cry. Where are you going? Where? But why? Wait then. You have life to look forward to. You must live for us as well. You who bear no grudges, don't go. You who forget, you must not. And the child said, don't forget. And the mother said, do not forgive.
As I stand here, a place where even death couldn't possibly survive, I think, I see, I wonder. As the dying walked to their death, what did they think? As they saw through eyes clouded by barbed wire, life, as they heard through ears pierced by screams of death, life, they saw, they heard, life among the living, while they lived, death among the dying. I am right now on my way from Lublin to Warsaw, and I have just experienced one of the hardest moments ever. I just had the opportunity to walk through one of the world's worst hellholes, Majdanek. I don't know why I feel the way I do now, but I know I wouldn't want anyone to feel the same way.
Anne, since returning from Poland, the most ordinary experiences take on new meaning. Yesterday, I was walking through the park and heard the sound of the wind through the pine trees. All of a sudden, I was back in Treblinka. What a contrast it was to Auschwitz and Majdanek. As we walked into Treblinka, our first impression was of a serene park with manicured grass and majestic trees, and except for the wind, extreme quiet, deadly quiet. As we walked further, it looked like a mass graveyard because all we saw in every direction were the stones. Silent, jagged rocks, placed there so carefully, each stone representing an entire Jewish community obliterated by the Nazis.
We're looking for a tombstone to my hometown.
After a prisoner rebellion in 1943, the Germans destroyed the camp of Treblinka to remove every sign of the atrocities committed there. Can you imagine nearly 2,500 deaths a day, 100 an hour? That means our entire group of 1,500 would have been gone in 15 hours in Treblinka alone.
I was sitting in the middle of the field and I said the one thing that hit me so hard was that at that point I was alone. I heard voices singing with me, and I promised myself and I promised them that somehow this would never happen again, whether through using any kind of gift I have or anything I have. That, I mean, certain things that I wanted out of my life I no longer want, and I made certain promises to them that if they can no longer live, they can live through me.
I keep seeing the memorial at Treblinka, an eerie reminder of the pits where thousands of bodies were burned.
This is Treblinka. 800,000 of our people died here. And here we stand together as an affirmation of life in this cemetery of death, because we are the fulfillment of the dreams and the aspiration and the wishes of those who died here. Their greatest fear was that with their death, the end of the line would come, the end of the Jewish people. And all of us here attest to the fact that that did not happen. and that we will make sure it never happens.
I had no flowers or candles. I put my hands in my pockets to protect them from the cold. There, in my pocket, I found a piece of bubble gum. As I took it from my pocket, I remembered what my father had told me as a child about why we eat candy on the Sabbath. To end the week with a sweet taste in our mouths. Realizing that Treblinka's victims never had a chance to end their weeks or their lives sweetly, I put my gum into the pit. Some people looked at me funny and got angry, thinking I was being cute. I said, let them have something sweet, too.
I came walking through the woods and just thinking about things, and came upon this field. I just walked a little bit down and I came up to this. And I couldn't speak with the guards very well, but they wondered what I was doing here, and I showed them that. And I came back and I told my friends, and one and another decided to come back and take a look so we could know and see the real Treblinka that nobody sees, unless they come upon it. And then the guard went, and 20 minutes later he found all those other bones. And who knows how many more are around. This is just one field that they plowed up.
It's just bones, like a field plowed of bones, You think about it.
No Sabbath will ever match the one we spent in Warsaw together. Our final evening was filled with dance and song, not only to drown out the pain of our days, but more importantly, to reaffirm life.
Even though we came from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different countries around the world, I feel as if there's a special secret that we share, and that now, no matter who I run into or who I speak to, no matter how old we are or how many years it's been since we've seen each other, that we'll always share that bond and be able to renew our friendship.
Yeah. with honor and die with honor. It was their message to us all. They gave their lives for our freedom. Through pain and agony, fought for humanity. We'll keep their memory alive.
When the Germans conquered Poland in 1939, they immediately began to isolate the Jews, tearing them from their homes and forcing them into restricted walled areas of the city called ghettos. 500,000 Jews were crammed into the tiny Warsaw Ghetto, where they were left to starve. Those who survived the streets were sent to the death camps. By Passover 1943, only 60,000 Jews remained alive in the Warsaw Ghetto.
Gray stone walls caging the souls of men, witness the death of Jews as prey in vultures' hands. Voice of hope shattered the dark of night, rose on the ghetto walls, the last command, thou shalt not despair, to live with honor and die with honor. It was their message to us all. They gave their lives for our freedom. Through pain and agony, fought for humanity. We'll keep their memory alive.
Today, monuments are all that's left to remind the world of what happened here, such as the Rappaport Memorial to the Warsaw Ghetto Fighters, which is made from the actual stone Adolf Hitler planned to use to be a monument to his victory.
At his steps, flowers proclaim their praise to those who won't return, but will remain forever in our hearts.
Mila 18 immortalizes the bunker headquarters where Mordechai Anilevich led a rebellion of starving, dying, and untrained ghetto fighters that miraculously lasted over 30 days against the might of a powerful German army. Ultimately, the entire ghetto was destroyed. Marilyn Nidober was one of the few survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto.
So when I lost my brother, I went to the street. I wanted to be killed because no life with no family. And this was in the evening. And I walked through the streets, but still I said to myself, I want to tell my story to somebody, and I want to die. I went in a cellar full of dead people. I stepped practically on them. And this was the daytime. I was sitting a whole day long. In the night, I went out looking for some bunkers. And rats, like cats, they were all around me. And they want to eat me because they look for food. They had plenty of food. So I found wrecks. I still had my mind. I covered all my face, just the eyes. I covered my hands, my feet. Whatever I found, I put in. And I was sitting that way a whole day long. And in the night, I went out again. I met somebody, and we went to another bunker. And that's how I went through.
And I think about what was destroyed by Hitler and the Germans 40 years ago. 6 million Jewish lives, over 1 million of those children. Try to picture what 1 million children represents. Think of a football stadium of 75,000. Fill it up with children, living, breathing Jewish children. Then imagine more than 17 of those stadiums situated one next to the other, and each of the seats filled with children. Now imagine every one of those children dead.
A little garden, fragrant and full of roses. The path is narrow, and a little boy walks along it. A little boy. A sweet boy. Like that growing blossom when the blossoms come to bloom. The little boy will be no more.
At the Jewish cemetery in Warsaw, we saw how the Germans turned sacred tombstones into a wall. How it hurt to see a cemetery desecrated.
Don't you remember, they did everything that would turn whatever the Jews felt. That's why when they did the roundups, they would do it on holidays, they would do it on Shabbos, because they knew that was going to be the time it would hurt the most. I mean, it was conscious. They knew the Jewish religion. That was the worst of it all. And they knew where the greatest pain would be. Why did they attack families? Because they knew that a Jew, look, there was a guy who was with us on the last time, who was a survivor. He said he had a place to hide in the ghetto. They had bunkers, like little under the cellar. But when the Germans started the roundup, they all went with the others because they didn't want to leave their parents. You understand what I'm saying? They just couldn't abandon their parents. So instead of hiding, they went.
Shattered lives, shattered dreams. European Jews had beautiful synagogues. Now, there's only one remaining synagogue in all of Warsaw. Centuries of a rich culture, so little remains, so much destroyed. Poland holds such bitter memories for us all.
Right now, I'm in Poland, but it's sucked with our blood, and I am stepping on it. But at least I know this, I can go in that camp and go out as a free man. And tomorrow we will leave hell and go to heaven, because we will leave Poland and go to Israel.
Holocaust. Israel. Two completely conflicting words, each of which encompasses many different feelings, emotions, experiences, traumas, and triumphs. One is a word of heart-wrenching pain and starving souls. The other, one of Torah and holiness. One is a word that tries to describe something that even thousands of words cannot. The other can be described in one word: home. The darkness was over. Dawn had come. The day was beginning and beautiful. At long last, we saw fulfillment of the Jewish dream. I was fulfilling the dreams of so many who could not. I smelled the air of Israel. I sang the Hatikva for all those who were silenced.
The bravery displayed by the Israeli army and the determination of its people truly energized us at the Defense Force ceremony, part of the Israel Independence Day celebration, and reminded us of the words of Benjamin Netanyahu.
We promise our brothers and sisters who died there, we promise them that we shall never be weak. We promise them that we shall never lack courage. We promise them that we shall never waver. We promise that every day, every hour, every minute of our lives will be dedicated to the lives of the Jewish people, to our survival, to our nationhood, to our state, to our home. We shall never be without the means to defend ourselves.
Israel represents everything and all the things that the Jewish people could hope to achieve, in that Israel is the Jewish homeland, and it is the place where Jews can be safe.
By nightfall, the celebration of Israel's Independence Day exploded into a Mardi Gras atmosphere.
Coming from communist countries to Israel was like a miracle. Like, it was incredible. The change was
unbelievable.
Unbelievable. That's right.
Who else? As a Jew, the feeling when I got into Israel, I mean, you were flying over Israel, you saw the land, and you saw everything, and you felt that this was your place.
You felt like you were coming home. Yeah, exactly. I've never been here before, you know. Neither have I. But like once, like getting out of Poland and everything, like you see the difference, and coming into Israel is like it's a big difference. It's a really good feeling. Yeah, we're all singing.
Even with all the problems that are going on in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip right now, you feel safer here than anywhere else.
Ever did.
And that's the main thing that's important about Israel.
Great, thank you.
All right, guys.
Bye. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Most of the crew was Gentile on this trip. I believe 3 of us were. We're probably the only 3 Gentiles on the whole trip. I didn't think much about Israel before, and I think about it a lot lately. Israel to me is like Miami in California to the Cubans. Israel is to the Jews. It's a place where if something happens, it would happen to them again. Is a place where they can go. It's their country. It's their home.
The Jews have such a bond with Israel and have had such a bond for thousands of years. And we can go there today, and when we're there, think about what went on there thousands of years ago in that same spot. It brings over you an awesome feeling of spirit and of godliness.
And I often think back on things we said at the rap sessions, each of us inwardly searching for understanding.
The main thought in my mind was how? How could somebody do this? Or how could they be so inhumane? How is it possible that this really could have happened?
With all this, I thought to myself, how could they have survived? Like, if I was there one day, I would have felt, just kill me and leave me alone. It's not worth it.
I think if I were in a situation like that, it would have been, it's just, all you have to do is touch the wire and that's it. Everything's gone. No more hunger, no more cold, no more torture, no more beating.
We have a survivor with us. If he hadn't had the desire to live, he wouldn't be here today. To be able to go back there as a free person.
This is the first time that I actually thought of the survivors and thought of the concentration camp victims as people. I don't mean people, I mean like specific individuals that were happy and that had families. And I remember looking through the museum today when I couldn't stop crying when I saw the pictures of the people with their families before the war. When there were the kids sitting on their mother's laps, there were the families sitting picnicking, there were people just sitting talking to each other with smiles and happy before the whole war started.
What I thought of was how the prisoners, if they were lucky, got to look out the windows. And when they did, what could they see? And what they would think about. And just that to look out that window was probably the hope it was what gave them hope. To look, but all they could see was the barbed wire and the cement wall. And then to see, like, they had no idea what was behind that wall, if they could get out, if they could be free once they got past that wall, if there was a minefield, if there was what they were waiting for, and all they could do was to look out that window and just to see. And every time I went to go take my notes and write down my thoughts, it was the windows I went to.
2 tiny eyes staring out of an endless void, begging for an answer to a question unknown. 2 tiny eyes reflected in fire, hungry flames, wanting flesh, wanting blood, licking upwards, consuming the living, consuming the bones upon bones, bones of those who only wanted to know why there were ashes upon ashes, upon ashes, upon bones of 6 million candles, each tiny light, flickering, wavering, burning, calling out for an answer. Where were you, they screamed. Why did you let me die? The calls of the dying and the calls of the dead. We learned a lot about love during this trip, about caring, nurturing, and hugging. We learned about touching someone's face, about putting an arm around his shoulder, about holding her hand. All the things our society has said to be careful about. We learn to share someone else's hurt and not just to say, don't cry, but to try to understand why they were crying and to share some of that pain with them. Above all, we learn to be human in a place where humanity failed.
I think I've grown years from the. I mean it's like I have a life before the trip and after the trip. That 2 weeks was the most meaningful 2 weeks of my life. It seems that as I left for the trip, I was Jerry Colbert, boy leaving for the March of the Living. When I came back, I felt as if I had matured years in that space of 2 weeks.
Sharon Feldman hoped this trip would help her to better understand her relationship with her father, a survivor of the camps.
I always was a spoiled, rotten little brat. And when I walked through Treblinka and when I walked through Auschwitz, there was nothing there. These people had nothing. My father, as a little boy, had nothing. He had nothing to eat. He had nothing to wear. And I live in a beautiful house now, and my father worked so hard. He had nothing. He took blood from a stone. And it's taught me to appreciate things that I've got and not to always want more and to be satisfied with what I have. And you just have to, you can't always want everything you see. And I've learned that I'm a very lucky girl. I'm a very lucky girl.
We saw firsthand how hate and discrimination can produce the most tragic consequences imaginable. Now when I hear an ethnic slur or joke made against any group, I shudder knowing where such prejudice can lead. In Germany, they didn't start off killing Jews. It was a slow process. First isolation, then dehumanization, and finally, mass murder. One by one, laws were passed removing rights from Jews. Jews were no longer citizens. Jewish doctors could not treat Germans. Jewish children could not go to public schools. The burning of synagogues went unpunished. The full force of the government, police, courts, laws, places that you and I count on to protect us, turned against the Jew. Posters, newspapers, all media degraded the Jew. Slowly, the Jew was perceived by the population as a pariah, an enemy. When the Germans decided to remove the Jews from society, no nation would accept them. The doors of the world were closed. When Jews were forcefully dragged from their homes and transported to concentration camps, walled ghettos, death camps, the population stood by and did nothing. They no longer saw Jews as the friends and the neighbors that they once were. They were less than human.
It was the fact that they had to dehumanize them, they had to torture them first. And instead of just putting them into the gas chambers, first they let the dogs bite them, and they let the dogs attack them. They had to make them strip naked. Religious people who, I kept picturing the women who never uncovered their hair in front of a strange man, having to strip naked in front of people and degrade themselves and have themselves checked and things like that. It wasn't just a murder, it was a total dehumanization process. And if it could happen in a democracy like Germany, it could happen in America also.
I feel that from seeing what happened during the Holocaust, that is the epitome of an example of non-tolerance toward a group of people. And even if someone just goes and makes an ethnic joke, a racial slur, which really in the long run means nothing, that's how racism and prejudice starts. It's that little tiny spark in someone's heart.
And it's hard to have peace throughout the world if you always have prejudice and you're always hating people.
I have a much better understanding of what can happen due to prejudice and discrimination. It's horrendous. It's just something I would never want my people or anybody else's people to go through again. It's just so horrible. And now I personally understand the Civil War and the blacks being discriminated against much more because I saw it against my own people, so I feel more compassionate towards others and when it happens to them.
I have a new understanding now of why America has always been a symbol to oppressed people all over the world.
It just made me thankful to be in a place like America where, we may have our problems, but at least people can get what they need and be happy and do what they want. It made me happy and proud to live in America.
Here in America, I can be a Jew. I can be an American Jew, I can be a Cuban Jew, I can be any kind of Jew I want to be. And anybody, I can show the world that.
We were all shocked by the prejudice we still felt in Poland more than 40 years after the war.
Their reaction to our presence here today, some 40 years later,
makes the apathy they displayed believable. Over the past week, we have all either experienced or heard a story which illustrates the feelings that the Poles hold now and held then. Anyone who praises Hitler's activities and insists that the job was not finished and says so in 1988 shows us how the Holocaust could have happened.
If you let evil go on, then you're a part of that evil. And the march taught us that you can't stand by and claim silence while evil's going on. That if you do that, then you're evil too.
For evil to triumph, and there is evil in the world, if we don't see that, we see nothing. And what starts with the Jews does not end with the Jews. That's the lesson for the world. What's the lesson for the Jewish people? We have special lessons. That Jews without a country they can call their own, are helpless Jews. The Jews who have no means to defend themselves are dead Jews.
Today, so many people want to ignore the past and forget. But aren't you afraid that if it happened once to a civilized, educated society, who's to say it couldn't happen again? And maybe not to the Jews next time.
I think most of the crew felt it like I did. After the second day, it was not a job anymore. It was something we had to do. We were the only ones that could record this for history. We were the only ones there that can bring it back.
It's so important that everybody knows, because the immediate generation that went through the Holocaust is fading out. We're the next generation to tell people what happened. And if this is forgotten, it'll just happen again.
Now that I've been through this, I feel almost as if I was a survivor of it all. And I feel that it is my responsibility to pass it on to my kids and to ensure that they pass it on to their kids.
If I could understand what I see, to bring the Holocaust here close to me, and if I could hear the 6 million cry, I'd appreciate life before I die. In Poland, every place I go, I change what I think to what I know. I know what I did not before. To love and grow, you must zachor, gedenk, remember.
Anne, I thought the experience of the March of the Living had settled in and become just another part of my life. But I realize now that nothing has settled in at all. Forever I'll be seeing and hearing things that will remind me of these 2 brief weeks in my life. I know that this unique experience will continue to be a source of strength, and that my memories of pain and joy, tears and laughter, Holocaust and Israel will never fade. Love, Josh.
We were all there for the same purpose, to make a statement that the Jews still exist in the world today.
I have more direction in my life. I understand my past, so I think it's easier to look ahead and see what's important.
I appreciate life more.
There seems to be a lot more important things in life than what color pants you're wearing, what designer jeans you're wearing.
It made me very proud to be an American. It made me very proud to be free.
I became a better Catholic, I think. I believe more in God. I believe more that there is a God.
If I had to tell my friend one thing about the march, it would be to remember.
years later, and I've been asked to give an update on what the March of the Living has meant to me. So I went in 1988 when I was 17, and I had said something to the effect of, I won't be so spoiled. I realized how good I have it, and I didn't realize how bad my father had it.
My father, as a little boy, had nothing. He had nothing to eat. He had nothing to wear, and I live in a beautiful house now, and my father worked so hard. He had nothing. He took blood from a stone.
My father was a Holocaust survivor from a little shtetl called Knievishiv, and as a little girl, I never really listened to his story. When I came back from the March of the Living, I guess I connected more with him, and I had a more open mind to listen to him. Subsequently, he did give his testimony to the Holocaust Documentation Center at FIU and then to the Shoah Foundation. And he spoke about his experience to different schools, and I was really proud of him. So 34 years later, I'm married, I have 3 children, I'm a speech-language pathologist, and I work at a public school in Broward County where I'm their Judaic Studies club leader. And I have taken kids from my school, Jewish and not Jewish, to the Broward County Convention Center where they meet with survivors like my father. And I guess it has just given me a better perspective. And the march has carried with me. And my son went on the 30th anniversary march back in 2018. And that had really made a difference in his life. And my daughter went to Poland last year, and that made a difference in her life. It is a really important part of our life, and I'm so grateful.
I was sitting in the middle of the field, and I said the one thing that hit me so hard was that at that point I was alone. I heard voices singing with me, and I promised myself and I promised them that somehow this would never happen again, whether through using any kind of gift I have or anything I have. That, I mean, certain things that I wanted out of my life I no longer want, and I made certain promises to them that if they can no longer live, they can live through me.
It's hard to over-exaggerate the impact that the March of the Living has had on my life. Of course, when I got back, I went and I spoke at synagogues and youth groups, and then life happened. I went to university. I got a PhD. I became a college professor. I got married, had 3 wonderful children. And throughout that, though, my experiences on the march impacted me in really meaningful but small ways. I'd be outside in the cold with my children and think, how did parents handle not being able to protect their children from the elements when the Nazis took everything away from them? Or I'd be holding 2 of my children's hands and think, how could a parent choose which child to give up? So throughout my life, I had these moments where the march was sitting there right underneath my skin. When my kids were older and I was able to lift my head above water a little bit, I decided to switch careers and leave being a college professor so that I could fulfill some of the promises I made, some on the March of the Living, the promises I made to myself to do more for the Jewish people, for the Jewish country. And then 4 years ago, I decided to move to Israel and take a job with Bar-Ilan University, a Zionist institution here that's committed to educating the next generation of citizens of the Jewish country to be smart and thoughtful, but also ethical, and know our history and know our traditions and know how to be part of something bigger than themselves.
The march taught us that you can't stand by and claim silence while evil's going on. That if you do that, then you're evil too.
The march was enormously impactful on the direction of my life. Upon my return, I shared the story of what I saw with thousands of people in live presentations and many, many more through this documentary. It was only in retrospect that I realized this was the beginning of my understanding of the power of storytelling to make the world a better place. I am now a creator of educational and documentary films, podcasts, and television myself, and all of my projects are about revealing and supporting untapped human potential. On a personal note, the march attuned me to recognize and challenge injustice wherever I can. My compassion and heart extends to people of all faiths and religions, ethnicities, sexual and gender orientations. Knowledge is power, and ignorance is the kindling of evil. Talk to people who aren't like you. Have uncomfortable conversations. travel to places that scare you in the world and internally, and read more books. Thank you for including me in this project and inspiring me as a teenager and again as an adult.
And I feel that it is my responsibility to pass it on to my kids and to ensure that they pass it on to their kids.
My wife and I have 4 children, and our oldest son, Brandon, had the privilege and honor of being the first ever second-generation marcher during the recent 25th anniversary trip. I have educated all 4 of my kids as to my experience on the march and to what happened during the Holocaust, and I am sure that they will pass it on to their children. The march changed me by strengthening my already strong passion and love for Israel, and I have made sure to pass that on to my children through our many family trips there, as well as the other programs that they have attended. A strong Israel is a key to never letting it happen again. Most importantly, it changed me through the understanding of how lucky we are to be free Jewish Americans, and that we must continue to do whatever we have to maintain that freedom and never take it for granted.
I became a better Catholic, I think. I believe more in God. I believe more that there is a God.
Shalom. I am Deacon Jorge Matamaro. In 1988, I was blessed to be one of a handful of Gentiles to take part in the first March of the Living.
A life-changing experience that brought a conversion to my heart and brought me back to my Catholic religion. A conversion that continued to grow, and when I received the call from God to become a permanent deacon, I said yes. Thank you, and the March of the Living, for changing my life and bringing me closer to God. God bless, and shalom.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Silverman. In April 1988, 1,500 teenagers from around the world traveled to Poland to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day.
Wow, you've just been on a time travel experience of almost 35 years. I want to say that a lot has changed since then, but ultimately some things never change. And as these marchers understood as teens and now understand as adults, we have to continue to educate, and we always have to be diligent to protect our freedom and to protect our democracy. So please keep doing what's right, keep fighting, and keep marching.
And I walked through the streets, but still I said to myself, I want to tell my story to somebody, and I want to die.